All right, Black Box Radio. We are in the box. It's a beautiful day in Baltimore City. I mean, spectacular day. It's not too cold. Well, it's not cold at all. And it's not too warm. It's just a real cool day. And we're in the box. We're about to do some infotainment. I'm just so excited tonight because I'm talking about something that I'm not familiar with, not too familiar with, and I'm about to get familiar. So that's what we do here. So I'm Queen. I am a host at Black Box Radio. We are a multimedia platform illustrating Black excellence. We expose Black genius, we platform Black people, and we disseminate information to the Black community and to other communities also. We do this about 6 to 9 times a month. We talk to different people in Baltimore and sometimes outside of Baltimore. So check us out. We're all over social media, all the social media sites. We have a website, blackboxradio.com. And we also have an email, blackboxradio@gmail. Hit us up, talk to us, keep in touch. Please subscribe, share, like, all that. We got a YouTube channel, hit that too. Subscribe, do all of that. So tonight we're moving right into the topic because I am like bristling to get to this policy and rules, which I don't like, but policy. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. That's on the agenda. We have a young man who is doing the damn thing. They are the leaders of the beautiful struggle. They are a think tank in Baltimore, a grassroots think tank. I'm gonna let him talk about that. But he's a co-founder. His name is Dayvon Love. Welcome to the box.
Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to it.
We're happy to have you. So, I shared with you before we started. I said, policy is because I think a lot of times the Black experience is so heavy, brother.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what our experience in just appearing every day is heavy, and the things that we have to do with our families, and it gets a little overwhelming. So sometimes you're not thinking of stuff that's going on that around you that really you're just trying to eat, you're trying to survive, you're trying to make it. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
so somebody said, well, you need to look at that policy. And then, those governmental on QRSTS, you got to go look it up. Like, I don't,
Mm-hmm.
they don't have time for that. So that's what people say. Like, I really don't, I say that. Let me stop talking about people. That's what so I want to get a light in like on like how the inner workings of like government policy and how it applies to the Black community and Black people, because it's very important that we know that we just can't just live here surviving. Policy is our problem. It
Mm-hmm.
is a detrimental problem to Black people, but we're going to talk about that. So please kind of tell us first what a think tank is. What do you guys do? And what is Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle? Let's talk about that first.
Yep. So, as I mentioned, before we hopped on, we actually, many of us in the organization are former high school and college policy debaters. And policy debate is a very particular kind of debate. I think a lot of times people think debate, they just think like people standing up in suits, using big words.
Yes.
But policy debate is a very particular technical kind of debate that is
Mm.
less based on like, good sounding oratory, and is actually based more on rigorous argumentation
Mm-hmm.
and evidence, rigorous evidence. And so what we did was, in debate, we came into the activity at a moment when there was an intellectual and academic innovation in the activity itself. Because, and let me actually back up, policy debate, it was actually historically been a pipeline.
I love
Because
that
historic.
term. You look
Okay,
amazing.
we good? We good?
Oh, you
Okay,
look
all right.
amazing.
Policy debate has been a pipeline for many of the major institutions that govern the world that we're in. So like there are major think tanks that were a part of the conservative revolution. So
Mm.
in the 60s and 70s, where we had the social movement, the Black Power movement, communist movement, New Left, the right established these think tanks for the purpose of being the intellectual architecture of their response to the
Mm.
movements of our communities, right? And policy debate produced a lot of those people who became the kind of intellectual architects, right, of the conservative revolution that culminated in Ronald Reagan in the 80s, right, in that
Sure.
conservative backlash.
Okay.
So we come out of an activity that produces these people who are a part of driving the agenda, and that's essentially what think tanks are. These are major institutions that provide the kind of underlying intellectual foundation, because elected officials aren't coming up with these ideas. They're institutions who are responsible for developing the intellectual firepower needed for these policies to be to push forward. And the conservatives were clear that if they were established these think tanks, they could control policy by essentially giving, the conservatives the playbook they needed to be able to move their policy. So we come out of an activity that's its function. But we came into the activity in the early 2000s at a time when there was an innovation in the activity. Dr. Eddie Warner and Daryl Birch at the University of Louisville, out of the Pan-African Studies Department, established a program in pedagogy and debate that was about challenging the norms and procedures of traditional debate. Policy debate being a very elite white activity, and many of the norms and procedures were the kind of approaches and methodologies that really didn't allow or lend itself to the development of a consciousness to address the conditions of Black people and oppressed people. And so they formulated an approach that included, it added, in addition to traditional academic authors, they included what they called organic intellectuals, which are like hip hop artists, right? And then fused personal experience and made that a part of their practice and debate. That culminated in the team of Liz Jones and Tanya Green, two Black women, to the quarterfinals of both national championship tournaments on the college level. My college debate partner, who's also from Baltimore, he's a year older. He went to Louisville for 2 years. He transferred to Tufts University, where we competed, to debate with me. Daryl Birch moved from Louisville to Baltimore. And in 2008, Devin and I, policy debates are 2-on-2 activity. Devin and I won a national championship, right? You extending on that intellectual legacy, right? And again, one of the things that for us, we consider that some of the best intellectual training you can get, because we're debating against, the people who are eventually going to run the world, essentially. And so, and the argument that we won nationals with was around the Black aesthetic, using the Black arts movement, Mary Baraka, Gail Addison, Sonia Sanchez, and using, Black scholarship, the kind of Black radical tradition as the basis for our intellectual work that allowed us then to win nationals. So that became our intellectual political foundation. So when we were done with debate,
so can I ask a question about debate a little? Because most of us have never debated. Okay. And so you say a policy debater, you would debate against other schools about policy, current policy, or policy that you were wanted to enact. How does a debate?
So the way debate is set up, both high school and college, every year there's a topic there's a topic committee. And the topic is a resolution. So it's usually like the United States federal government will, and then they pick an area of policy. So it might be United States federal government should substantially increase constructive engagement with, the Middle East, right? Or United States federal government should substantially reduce agricultural subsidies to these crops, or, right? So they would have these resolutions, and tournaments, national tournaments, they're 8 rounds. You're affirmative 4 times, you're negative 4 times. Right. And so that's it can get quite complex, but that's the general way that it would operate. And then the idea is at a tournament, you win at least 5, you clear the elimination rounds, and then it becomes win or go home. Right. And then the regular season tournaments. So there are regular season national tournaments, and then there are 2 national championship tournaments at the end of the year.
So the national championship is just like it would be like with basketball and football.
Exactly.
Of the whole like Division I, or
Exactly.
So it's the same thing. So you guys got the big joint.
Exactly.
Okay. So we're trying to understand. Very different. So
And debate was like the way that like athletes in NCAA, like their whole life was organized around I play basketball. Exactly. That's how debate is at the college, high school and college, where it's like your whole, because you're trying to win nationals. Like there are people who, like, my goal when I came into college was to win a national championship, and there's people all over the country who that's their aspiration. So they organize their life around, by the time I'm a junior and senior, trying to win the big trophies.
And now let's say, because these national championships and of course in sports is competitive. So I'm hearing debating this, it's a competitive a part of it
Mhm.
also. So within
Mhm.
that competition, how do you scale that? That's how you scale into a think tank, or you scale, is this the scale like a lawyer? What would be that,
So there are a
to
variety.
applicate that national championship, in other words?
Yeah, so there are a variety of different skills that you get from the competition, right? So for us, we were clear that it was training for what we wanted to do with our community, right?
Mm,
And after winning nationals, we were like, okay, we want to use these skills the same way these white boys, they graduate and they've done well in debate and they go work for some major firm, to work for, the conservative, the APAC or whatever major think tank.
mm-hmm,
We Our thought was we're going to develop a think tank in Baltimore that has the, Black radical Pan African nationalist worldview that we operate from, and be the kind of think tank public policy advocacy for Black people. Because we looked around and we noticed that many of the organizations that were doing policy advocacy on the issues that impact Black people, there are a lot of contexts where it weren't led by Black folks. And even the Black folks that were leading it, they weren't coming from a worldview rooted in Black self-determination, Black sovereignty, Black liberation. A
sure.
lot of it was like it was assimilationist, you know what I mean, opportunistic,
Mm-hmm.
and so we wanted to build something that could truly
Capitalistic.
be exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what this has scaled into. This
Hmm.
wonderful organization called Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. I'm glad that's where
That's
you
right.
went. I was trying to guide you there, but bro, you went
That's
right
right.
in. Yes, I see your experience. I love you for that. so,
Yes, man. Yes, man.
so Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle is where we are. So this is how
Hmm.
we birthed this. So how, how actually did it come together? Like, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to do it in a way where actually it is your job every day. Am I correct?
Yeah, so when we started, so there are a few things. When we started, we were all recent college graduates, and
Okay.
we all had other jobs. I was a high school teacher, debate coach, other folks who work at different places. But the idea was that, we wanted to build something that could be formidable. And the first issue that we worked on, there was a $104 million juvenile detention facility that the state was slated to build. And what's important about that, at the time, the juvenile facilities were only half full. So we were clear that if they're going to build this new 150 bed jail, they were going to fill it.
All
Right.
day.
And so we were part of a coalition of organizations that ultimately were successful in stopping the construction of that jail. Right. And so that was kind of our first effort. One of the things that, in terms of decision point for us, we were very clear that because of our worldview and perspective, we could not be the kind of organization that was dependent on grants and philanthropy for our ability to operate. And,
Absolutely.
and so we decided, so we're not a C3, we're not a nonprofit,
Hmm.
we're a LLC, we're a business. And we were intentional about that because we were clear that we were going to need to be able to generate our own revenue.
No one's gonna give y'all no money.
You know what I mean? And so in order for us to be able to do what we need to do. And
Sure.
so in the beginning, it was difficult. Like I said, we all worked other jobs and whatnot. But I can say today, just because we took that early road of just doing it the hard way, base building, being
Hmm.
in community, being consistent. We did the work on the jail. We were consistent about police accountability work. We do other
Hmm.
political education with youth. So just being real consistent in the community and developing a revenue model that essentially allows us to be independent,
Hmm.
right? But it was one of those things where, in terms of our reputation in Baltimore and the work that we do, being the folks that can say the things that a lot of organizations aren't able to say, right, in certain spaces, because we have a business model that allows us to do it without having to rely on philanthropy. So there's no phone call that anybody can make, right, to pull our resources to impact our livelihood. And so at the beginning, we just put our heads down. It was difficult. I mean, there's no sugarcoating it. It was difficult, long hours and struggling. But like I said, we were able to get to the point now. We were founded in 2010, right? So this
Okay.
year is 13 years of
Mm.
us having been, doing this and being able to get to this point. And so yeah, so that's how we're here today.
Amazing. So as you say, okay, this is what we're going to do, it's Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. Did you intentionally say, okay, we're going to work on things in community that particularly is going right now, so we can start like our grassroots, and so folks can know who we are? Or you had different pillars that you said, like, we're going to go after this. What was the things that you thought that you guys could work immediately and build your, like, I guess build like your marketing, so folks will know who you are and what you're going to do in community?
I mean, really, it was just a combination of picking issues to work on that were relevant to the community, right? So
Like
that's why
that's
a lot of it
crucial.
was,
Hmm.
yeah. And so that's why a lot, the jail, we mentioned the youth jail because we work
Yeah.
with youth. That was a big part of our backgrounds. Police accountability,
Yeah.
just given the fact, so these are issues that even before they were super popular in the mainstream, things that on the ground people were concerned about, and we were able to lend an expertise, that would allow us to be useful, and allow us to be able to disseminate information and mobilize the community
Hmm.
in the direction that is most needed. And one of the things that over the years, so going back to one of the things you mentioned about like the importance of policy and even people understanding what it is, because I think one of the things that has happened, Amos Wilson in Blueprint for Black Power, he describes how black people have been oppressed, have been damaged by the tyranny of the oppression of white supremacy in this society. And what happens is that many of us have not thought seriously about how to wield power. What happens is that I think we confuse clout with power,
Hmm.
right? Clout being like social status. Many of us have not operated the machinery that makes things in the society go, right? So if you think about just regular things, right? Like, we're using the internet. We don't have to think about the machines that make the thing go. We don't have to worry about, how the signal impact, there are all these things that we don't have to worry about. These
Yep.
It's infrastructure that exists,
Cloud, all of that. Yeah.
right? And so when we think about like what it means to be a community that has power, a part of it is many of us don't have the experience of operating the basic machinery that makes the society go,
Oh wow.
right? Because it's all done for us, right? So even when we think about like things that government does, we're not even used to thinking about there are people that actually make these things go, right?
Hmm.
And because they're able to make these and they're done for us, we never see the things that produce, when payroll, right? Or the company that does waste management when that picks up your trash, the people that are digging in the ground the potholes to fix the pipes. Like these are all things that we don't have to think about it as done for us. The disadvantage is that the people who have power, those are things that they have the infrastructure to control, to think about, to manage, right?
Hmm.
And in certain ways, white supremacy has caused this kind of infantilization, right? Where what we have been socialized to do is petition white people and institutions outside of our community to do right by us, right? We don't have what y'all have. And so we're gonna petition, emotional blackmail, be angry to make you give me what you all have, to make you all do the things that you all do for yourselves for us. And while the impulse it's a reasonable one, just given how we're socialized, if we truly want to be an empowered people, we have to shift our thinking, not just from the kind of moral appeals to our oppressor to say, do for us what you do for yourselves, but how do we organize ourselves from a perspective of power to organize our society in such a way where we can meet our own needs, right? Using the instruments of government and policy to advance us. Because people who are wealthy, who have resources, who have power, like they use government policy to help them make money, to help them get access to resources, to help them control the very industries that they're in. That's why major companies pay lobbyists, right? That's why they pay attention to government, because folks who really have power understand the importance of being engaged in those structures that make the things go. That again, for a lot of us, they just happen, so we don't think about it. But we have to begin to think about who are the people that are in control, where are they, and what are the kind of decisions they're making, what is the kind of work that they're doing to make things go. And then once you start doing that, there are questions that we can start asking, like the people who are doing construction, how come we can't just get the contracts for our community and start to build the kind of infrastructure where instead of it going there, we can go here.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are people that are making the decision. There are people who are making billions of dollars to build all these, major structures. And if we're in a community where Black people, we want to be empowered, well, how do we get into the position where we can just say, well, instead of that company getting the contract, we're gonna give it to them, right? These are the kind of things that I think when we talk about like the importance of policy, like that is the importance of policy, is being able to be in a position. And to me, when I think about like what it means to be in politics, to truly be engaged in politics, you're only doing if you're doing one of three things. If you're impacting governmental policy, impacting the distribution of resources, or building institutions, right? If you're not doing any one of those three things, then as far as I'm concerned, that's not truly in an impactful way being engaged in politics.
Wow, you gotta say what's those three again? That's amazing. Oof.
So impact governmental policy,
Mm-hmm.
impact the distribution of resources,
Mm-hmm.
and the ability to build institutions.
Wow, I love to talk to you debaters. You guys talking paragraphs.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
love that. Wow. So I listen to you, and it's like you're saying the social engineering that we've been exposed to by white supremacy living in America. Everything is done for us, so we don't really think that we got to do things for ourselves. Is that really like the breakdown? Is just
And it
it's
doesn't
already
occur to
done.
us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
it
if the supermarket closed, we're gonna be hungry. So
exactly.
so in other words, we don't think about policy because it's being done and we're not privy to it.
And
Okay.
I think it's about a mindset in terms of like, I think a part of it is if you are thinking from a mind frame of I need to have control of the institutions that govern my life, govern my community's life,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm practicing sovereignty, then my first question needs to be who owns it, who controls it, who's making the decisions,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But in a society as the one we live in, right, colonial white supremacist society, capitalist society, then we're socialized, many of us, to think, how do I get the things I need to survive?
Yes, and
Right.
that's it. And that's
And
it.
that's not bad per se, right? That's a
Mm-hmm.
natural given our position in the society. But if
Yes.
we're serious about what it means to be empowered, then we need to figure out ways to get our community organized from a mindset shift that is rooted in sovereignty and power, where instead of starting and stopping with those what I call survival questions, we start with, okay, who's in charge, who makes the decisions, how is it governed, and how do we control it?
Hmm. I think a lot of times when I look in community, I've been talking to folks, is they're powerful, but they don't understand how to yield that power. It's like
Exactly.
and also there's a kind of staring into like the power is in the government and the power is in with the people. And a lot of times people don't know that we have, and collectively we have an enormous power. And I think a lot of times, we talk about we do want to be in power, but we don't even know how to yield the power that we have just in our
Hmm.
space. Because if you want to change something, Brother Dayvon, you could do it right in front of you. That's where you
Absolutely.
start. People say, "Oh, well, I want this going," but what about on your street? What
Hmm.
about in your house? So I think a lot of times is even if as powerful as we are, yielding that power and knowing how to apply it, the application of. I think that's where a lot of us we're not there. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah. And let me say two things. One is that going back to what I was saying about how we confuse clout with power,
Hmm.
many of us have never experienced power where it wasn't about social status and clout,
Exactly.
being
Yeah.
able to move something, right?
Hmm.
So we look on TV, we see people who are famous and celebrities, and then we see things happen as a result. So when that's all you see,
Yep.
right, then that's what people think moves things, right? The problem is that when we think about like the things that actually move policy, elected officials count votes. And so retweets, watching television, listen to these are all things that, we may think if I get someone who can be loud enough, who has a big enough megaphone, that can influence and change things. but elected officials count votes, right? And the people who they listen to are the people who they know can deliver them their ability to get reelected. And the interests behind many of them have resources to be able to focus on those networks that are actively engaged. So that confusion that folks have where people think it's about clout, where the people who actually have power are thinking about, we're going to count heads, we're going to count people that show up, we're going to count people that come down. And so we don't have, now part of the challenge is that, we don't have the resources to build the kind of independent electoral infrastructure
That's it.
that can do that. And that's a part of what we're trying to build. Like a part of what LBS is trying to build is that independent electoral infrastructure, right? That can push back against that. But there's that confusion, clout versus power. And then the other thing is that many of us are taught to think about the world and think about power as individuals. Like they think like if we get a good person in office, then it'll solve the problems. And I've had to tell people that that's actually the problem. That's actually the problem, is that it's not about getting good individual people in there, because people are extension of people who are in public office or any kind of political position. You tell me three, I don't need to know their names. You tell me these three things about them, it tells me everything I need to know. Who trained them, where their money comes from, and who stands to benefit from them being in office. If I know those three things, I don't need to know their name. I don't need to know anything else about them, right? But the problem is, again, we think in terms of we get some really good, smart individual people in office, but this is a machine. And in order to beat machines, you need a counter machine to beat it.
You better say it.
And so that's a part of what I also think the challenge is too, is that, and this is propaganda that we get. So it's propaganda that it talks so much. So when we, like every 4 years, when it talks about president, you're talking about individual people, right? But very rarely are people exposed to what are the machines behind those people, because that's really who they are. Who they are in politics are the machines behind them, right? Not the individual person and personality. Right. But unfortunately, the propaganda we get reduces politics to personality and morality. Like Dayvon's a good guy, so put him in office. As opposed to, there's a machine that's accountable to Black people behind him. We need to get behind that, or we need to build it so that whoever we put there has the machine to be able to carry out our agenda. Because that's what other communities do. I remember when I worked years ago, I worked for Councilwoman Helen Holton, who represented the 8th district in Baltimore City. Majority Black district, some white white pockets, but majority working class, Black district, Emerson Village, Howard Park, Irvington, Beachfield. And I remember noticing the difference between how the residents in the majority Black areas were treated or treated the elected officials versus folks in the white areas. In the Black areas, I noticed that it was much more like complaints, like things are messed up, I need you to help us do it, right? In the white parts, when I would go to meetings, it was like, so here's what you're gonna do, right? Here's what you're gonna do.
Whole different language.
Whole different attitude.
And speaking from a place of power.
And speaking from a place of power, because they know that they have an infrastructure.
Absolutely.
That can impact, right? Yeah. So even their attitude was there. So that's part of what I mean. It's like, we need to build the infrastructure so that when folks come before us, it's not we're complaining about the things that aren't getting done, hoping they get done. But the attitude is like, so you want your seat, here are the things we need you to do in order for you to get our support, in order for you to continue to be where you are and be able to make those kinds of threats. And this is the other thing about politics too, that I think is also important. And it's a hard reality that even people who get into it, I think, misunderstand. Politics is warfare without the bloodshed, right? And so to really have power, you had the question that a person needs to be able to answer. And I'm gonna say this very blunt, cuss, right?
What?
Okay, I'm gonna say this real bluntly, and I'm gonna say it this way because I think it's important for people to hear. In politics, the question that you need to be able to answer is, if I don't do it, if they don't do it, can I fuck them up if they don't?
You better know it.
right?
I love
And
it.
if the answer to that question, and you have to answer and ask that question objectively,
Mm,
right? And if the answer and so the answer that it can't be like I'm a scream loud, I'm gonna talk about I'm gonna talk shit.
hmm.
Like that don't no one cares
That's not
about
gonna
that.
work. Mm-mm.
Can you impact their livelihood? Can
Yeah.
you impact their ability to make money? Can you
Yep.
impact their ability to get that position they're trying to get? Or impact their network's ability to maintain control? Right. And that ability, that's the ability to like really punch folks in the face. And if you're not able to do that, you don't have political power.
Mm.
You're dependent on the benevolence of the people who you're petitioning to, right? And that's a very different perspective that I think again, not enough of our people are exposed. And so LBS, like one of the things we take pride in is that we hit people in the mouth.
I
Like
love
they're organizations and individuals who we're impacting their ability to have control. We've impacted their ability to make money off our community. We've impacted their ability to get elected, right? Impacted their ability to run for their next highest their higher office. Can you hurt people?
it. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And that's why I say politics is warfare without the bloodshed. And unfortunately, it is, the people, as white folks
Mm-hmm.
who are playing it that way,
Whoa.
right? As
Yeah.
opposed to our community who, again, were socialized to petition them to include us in their machines.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot, and it's the truth though. Wow. So because the Black community, we have a myriad of issues. We have I mean, in Baltimore alone, you could just talk about so many things that, first of all, the city presents, and how it's ran and how it's been ran, and then how Black people have existed in that. And then the application of so many different systems against Black people in this city, from education to spirituality, everything. And so when folks are being impacted by so many different things, and just in community and life, as I was saying, being Black is heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And then this thing that's been created called politics is so systematic.
Mm-hmm.
It's so incestuous.
Mm-hmm.
People say, "Are Republican and Democrat?" I'm like, please.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Mm-hmm.
all doing the same things. They eat lunch together. They they do dirt together. You understand what I'm saying? I think
Mm-hmm.
this thing is, I'm a Democrat or whatever. We see that, and whoever's in office, the same stuff goes on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what do Black people tackle first? I mean, we definitely need to be policy, um, at least efficient, and know what's going on. But our lives are so heavy, bruh. So
Mm-hmm.
how do we get here to understand even what you're talking about? Because people are like, I got so many people I talk to. I don't have time for that.
Mm-hmm.
But we gotta make time for that.
Yep. So I'll say three things. The first is that it's important, I think, for folks in our community to specialize, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
everybody can't do everything,
Yep.
right? And so the different organizations who have different roles in our community in terms of what they do for our people, right?
Like that.
Everybody can't do it all, but those who we identify as fulfilling a particular role,
Mm-hmm.
people can do what they can to support them, right? So it's like, yeah, you may not have time. Maybe you can be a sustainer with LBS and give $5 a month or $10 a month.
There
Maybe
you
you
go.
can, get on our listserv and email your legislator. Like when we do stuff in Annapolis, we have a thing where it's a template that allows people to contact their legislator to say we support what LBS is saying,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there are ways that even if people don't have a lot of time, that's fine. People do whatever they can to support those organizations that are specializing in their particular area,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
I
that's one
like
thing.
that.
Two is that one of the narratives that as Black people we have to be militant and fighting against. It's this, and I'm not saying you saying this, but there's this narrative of Black people ain't doing nothing, right? And I think a part of it, we have to be better as a community at identifying the people who are actually doing things that are having an impact, even if it's not huge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Identifying the things that are having an impact and helping to scale those things up. Because, like I mentioned, when I talked about the story about debate, like we were trying to get support for our debate work. they're at this point, I believe, so 2008 is when I won nationals. I think right
Mhm.
now they're about 18, and Devin and I were the first team of Black debaters. There was an individual brother from New Jersey who won in '02, and then Devin and I were the first team of Black debaters. So in '08, there were three Black people who were national debate champions. Now I think there are about 15 or 16 of us now, right? Six of them are from Baltimore,
Really?
right? That's something that people need to know about,
Yeah.
right? But because of the narratives that I think, that we get socialized with, people don't know all the amazing stuff that's happening. And so I think a part of it is, people being more diligent about, connecting to Black Church Food Security Network, Heber Brown III, who's
Right.
doing that,
Exactly.
Bloom Collective, it is, Black Maternal Health
Mhm.
Advocacy, collectively,
Yeah. Yeah.
like, to learn about the folks that are doing the work
Yeah.
that is actually helping, that actually has some results. I think that's important for us as a community. And then third is LBS, the standard we hold ourselves to is we have to be able to demonstrate that we can deliver real material, concrete results to our community. And every organization or individual that claims to be working for our community should be able to demonstrate their ability to impact the community. I say it that way because I think there is a lot of, I think, justified disillusionment, because you do have a lot of people that talk, right? That'll talk about, Black freedom, and, they'll
A lot of
talk, and
nonprofits in this
yeah,
area.
and will pontificate and all that. And so there is, I think, a lot of justified disillusionment.
Okay.
And so I think those of us that are doing the work need to be able to say, and we need to have a culture where, like, anyone that posts me and says, Dayvon, what have y'all been able to do for Black people? Right? I can say, well, we worked on the Baltimore City Children and Youth Fund, where several millions of dollars have been invested in Black grassroots organizations. We're about to establish the Baltimore Reparations Commission that's going to put, even more money into the hands of Black people. Worked on the Black Arts and Entertainment District on Pennsylvania Avenue to support Black creatives and create, help to, use Black arts as a tool to develop West Baltimore in a way that empowers Black people. So there are all these, and then there are other even more granular things, specific things that we can point to, that we can say,
Mhm.
this bill helped barbers to be able to apprentice more than just one barber at a time,
Yep.
right? Like, we can point to specific things and say, here are the things that we've done that materially impact our community. And I would argue that a lot of the support we get comes as a result of the fact that we've been able to actually deliver results. And so I think we have to create a culture where people can be asked and people can be prepared to answer. This is how we've been able to possibly benefit the community.
Hmm. So that's the toolkit, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, the three. Okay. Well, I think that's some things that we can do individually. I heard as an organization, but also individual. You could definitely give to some of these organizations like Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, and to help them with their work. And all of these. I think a lot of times too, Dayvon, is I don't think we even know the nonprofits out here that are or for profits that are really doing good work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know how to change that. That's a marketing thing, and a lot of people aren't per se that into community. They're into their own communities. That's one of the
Mm-hmm.
things. We're very siloed too, and so
Mm-hmm.
you're into your own community. You don't see what's going on in other communities or in other places, so you don't even know. You never seen a collectivity, or you never heard
Mm-hmm.
of the Bloom Collective. Those
Mm-hmm.
type of things. So one thing too is how do we get? How does the Black community know more about helping those type of organizations that are very impactful in the Black community? How do we go about that?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think we have to be okay with asking. Davon, what
Mhm.
did you say you do? You said you do Leaders Up Beautiful Show. What is that? What do y'all do? This
Okay.
is the work y'all do. Okay, cool. And be able to discern. I think the average person could do a fairly good enough job discerning someone who's just selling them a dream versus someone who can say, "Here's what we did. Like, here's the actual laws that we've been able to pass. Here's how these laws actually positively impact Black people." So I just think people have, and that has to be a culture where people are okay with just being able to, I mean, and there's some people who will be offended by that, by someone walking up to them and saying, so what do you do? And what is your organization about? You know, people who will feel like, I don't have to answer you. But I think we have to have a culture where it's like, no, if you claiming to work on behalf of Black people, then people get to be like, okay, so then what do you do exactly? What have you been able to deliver for Black people? You know what I mean? Because as you and I know, there are lots of people who um, profiteer off of Black suffering, right? That
Of
this
course.
whole enterprise of like activism and, you know, that there are people for whom it becomes their way of securing a livelihood for themselves as opposed to, you know, actually benefiting the community. And so we just have to have a culture where people are, and I'm encouraging everyone listening to this. You see people who are saying they're doing good in the community, or you look online, shoot them something and say, hey, tell me more about what you do. Show me examples of what you've been able to accomplish, right? And ask other people, right? Ask other people. So, because I say, don't just ask me. Other organizations that you support that do good work, ask them who are folks in the community that are doing good work. I would argue that you'll get a lot of you'll get a lot of similar answers about organizations that are in the community doing the actual work. You know, so I think we just have to have a culture where people just okay with rolling up on people. Tell me about Dayvon and LBS and what do they do?
Creating that.
Hmm.
That's what I'm like where do you start? You know, I think the culture. You're right. You got to have a culture of that, and also accountabilities for these organizations, but to also know who they are. And but
Hmm.
again, we have to. It's like we're creating everything as we go. You
Hmm.
get what I'm saying? I think a lot of time.
Hmm.
Do you think that the expectations that we're having, because we're the first generation that can like hire our own children, you know, we're more empowered than any generation before us, and so a lot of times I hear, well, why we don't have this, because of course we're building it as we go, and but the problems are bound. so, so
Yeah, I think a
how
part
do
of
we
it.
how do we deal with that? Problems are everywhere, and we don't have the infrastructure to do really what we need to do. But we got to do what we got to do. You know.
Yeah, I think a part of it is one of the impacts of racism and white supremacy on our collective consciousness is that I think sometimes we start from the place of we don't have.
Mm,
And one of the things that I have been fortunate to observe, you know, because after we finished debate and started building LBS, we were really intentional about seeking out Black elders with movement history in Baltimore, right, to
mm,
really get that perspective that was grounded in Baltimore. And what I learned was that there are actually a bunch of things that we do have. And sometimes it's the kind of thing where it's like, damn, we don't even know all the stuff we got. That if we knew, if we valued it, like the impact of white supremacy and notions of Black inferiority on our consciousness is many people don't even have the ability to value the assets we do have in our community, you know? And so I think a part of it is people really taking the time to, you know, build with folks that have some of that movement history, but also look around. And so I mentioned him earlier, Heber Brown, Black Church Food Security Network, to
mm,
me, which is such a good example, right? Where, you know, the Black church, the churches all over the place, right? You can criticize the church, you can have legitimate criticism of, you know, whether the church is an institution that's helped to hurt our people, but it's an institution that exists and has served vital roles in our community that many of us don't know. They're churches that really, in their
mm.
communities, you know, provide school supplies and, you know, support for paying people's BGE. Like they're churches that at a very basic level meet those needs and do stuff in our community that we just don't know about because it's not publicized. And so Heber Brown's thinking is like, oh, let's use this vast resource that we've developed over this many years, all these buildings, all this land, and let's build a food infrastructure that we control to be able to truly control what we eat and really practice sovereignty. To me, it's having that perspective. We look at these churches every day and just drive past them and think nothing of it. But if we change our mindset and think to ourselves like, I wonder what they're doing in there, right? And they may have resources, you know, again, space, an industrial kitchen, right? Or you know, and financial resources that if organized and mobilized can be useful. So I think a part of it again is just like people undoing some of the internalized injected oppression and to be able to even recognize like some of the stuff we do have that could be a good starting point for getting more of the things that we need.
Hmm. Yeah, I had one of Heber Brown's representatives. It's amazing what they're doing over there. I mean,
Absolutely.
amazing. And churches are everywhere, so they can almost be a network.
Exactly.
And it's such a smart movement, and food is our issue. That's one of the issues in our community. It triggers the behaviors we're seeing, and we're unhealthy. So, but that's not what we talk about. But it's so many so many things in our community that we need to solve. So when it comes to Baltimore, what are you guys working on that directly affects Baltimore right now? At least a youthful struggle.
So one of the major things is so we've been working on the cannabis legalization front. We were clear that, back in 2015, that
Mhm.
states were going to legalize cannabis and eventually Maryland would. And we were clear that it was an opportunity to use that multi-million dollar industry to be a revenue source for reparations for the war on drugs. Now, and we were clear that in addition to, because I think a lot of people focus on the business part, getting Black people access to the business, the industry, and
Mhm.
that's important. But reparations should come that shouldn't be contingent on someone's interest in participating in the industry. That should just be resources that come from the industry that just come straight to the communities impacted by the war on drugs.
Yes.
So we were clear about that years ago and started planting that seed and making that point. And so in 2022, the Maryland General Assembly started its process of legalizing cannabis and established something that we actually wrote, the Community Repair and Reinvestment Fund. 30%, and actually this past session they bumped it up to 35% of the tax revenues from legalized recreational cannabis will go to this repair and reinvestment fund. Each jurisdiction will get a percentage of that fund. That percentage that each jurisdiction gets will be determined based on that jurisdiction's contribution to statewide cannabis related arrests over from 2002 to 2022. The idea being that Baltimore City, Prince George's County, those majority Black jurisdictions will get a larger percentage of those resources. Each jurisdiction will then have to pass a law that determines how they spend their portion of those resources with some guardrails, which means so guardrails including they can't be used for law enforcement activities. The
Good.
resources can't be used to supplant existing government programs or services, and they
Good.
have to be targeted to repair the harm done by the war on drugs, right? And so we actually, in Baltimore, it was introduced back in February. We worked on a bill that established the Baltimore Repair and Reparations Commission.
Hmm.
And that commission will determine how the resources that come to Baltimore are spent. And that bill actually is on third reader on Monday and will pass for final passage this coming Monday.
What do you
And
call
then the
third
only
reader? What's third reader?
so legislative process, a bill has to be read three times.
Okay, got it.
So first, it's introduced, goes in the committee, read again, and then the third time it gets voted for final passage. So
Got
Monday it'll be voted for final passage,
Amazing.
and then it gets to the mayor's desk. And so so it's pretty much done. And so now the work we have to do is the implementation work, which is making sure we get good commissioners. Each council person is going to be able to make a recommendation to the mayor of a commissioner who will serve on this commission, and then the mayor appoints from that. And so it's
Hmm.
going to be really important that we make sure we get very good commissioners that are aligned with the perspective of reparations.
Yeah, we
And
gotta
so that's
cultivate them. Yes.
exactly. That's the next work on that. But that's one of the big things that we were working on. One other thing I'll mention on just
Well, let
along the
me ask
lines
you
of
one question before you mention it.
uh-huh. Yep.
30%, when you say 35%, is that the money from the licensures or what they're paying to have a license, or is that the gross or net sales? What is this 35% coming
Of
from?
all sales tax for
Of
that Maryland
all
gets for
sales tax that
recreational.
okay, wow. That's a pretty chunk, bro.
Oh, that's going to be a
You
lot of
know,
money.
everybody, cats, mouse, everybody gonna be smoking. So
Yeah.
you
That's
know
right.
it.
That's
So
right.
that's pretty big. That's a quarter and a little change. Okay,
Yes,
love it.
ma'am.
Okay,
Yes,
that's what
ma'am.
I want to know. Go ahead, you can
Yeah.
continue.
And just on quick on the cannabis part, one of the things we worked on this past session is making it so that law enforcement can't solely use odor as probable cause for search and seizure.
Hmm.
Because law enforcement, even though it's about to be legal in July 1, law enforcement wanted to still be able to say, if I smell it, I can search you,
Why would they do that?
right? You know what I mean? And so, um, so we were fortunate. We were actually very fortunate to actually, because there was a lot of pushback.
Okay.
But we had a bill. We worked with the ACLU of Maryland to pass a bill that prohibits law enforcement from the sole use of odor in a search and seizure, and that any evidence that they get if they search illegally based on that is inadmissible in court, even if the person consents. Right. So that's important because our concern was that law enforcement was just going to just say everything's odor and just violate folks' rights. And actually, that bill was the last bill to pass during this past session, 11:59, that Monday, the last day of session. Um, that bill was actually extremely difficult to pass. Shouldn't have been that hard to pass. It was extremely difficult to pass. But I
Mm.
wanted to mention that because, people who are, who are listening that are consumers, it's going to be important for them to know that if they get
Yeah.
stopped and the officer says, I smell it, as of July 1, that's not probable cause to, you don't get to search me just because you smell odor.
I love that, and that's important. And so, as July 1st, they can't use that at all.
That's right.
That's going
And
to
if they
change.
do, they can't use
It's,
that. They can't nothing in court.
they can throw it out of court. Wow,
Hmm.
amazing, amazing. That's great, and you guys worked on that too.
That's right.
Hmm. Because this weed thing, well, this cannabis, I know it's cannabis, that's the word, but listen, the street word is this weed thing.
Hmm.
I think it changes, first of all, the makeup of our justice system.
Hmm.
When we start, it's unfortunate that a natural plant has put so many people and changed so many lives, and not in a good way.
That's right.
And then now we turn around and use that same medicinal plant, and now we're using it for our own needs, and now it's okay.
Hmm.
So I think it will definitely change the propensity for Black men and Black women to go to jail with these small amounts of weed, and I don't even think it makes sense. I think
Hmm.
everything should be changed, but I mean, it's not something you guys can do. But what are you guys looking at as being the next thing? Like what is on the horizon that's going to be the next thing for Black Baltimore? Because I think education needs to be looked at. The school system, and something's wrong.
Hmm.
I mean, and they haven't right to ship in a long time. And I don't know if it's policy. I don't know what the issue is, but there's something wrong
Hmm.
with education in Baltimore City.
Hmm.
And education to me, and food, the
Hmm.
availability of grocery stores, and just the right to have fresh food. Those are two big issues in Baltimore City for Black people. So
Hmm.
what's the next big thing for you guys?
Well, I mean, the reparations thing, we got to see it through in terms of the implementation, and we make it a point to be real clear about our capacity. Like, like we have the ability to work on the stuff that we can work with, 5-person team.
Sure.
So we have the ability to work on the stuff that we work on. We've certainly worked on education related stuff, in the past. And I mentioned Heber Brown in terms of the food piece, Eric Jackson and his team at the Black Yield Institute in Cherry
Mm-hmm.
Hill. And so we look forward to working with other Black organizations to tackle those issues. We want to really hunker down on making sure we get the reparations thing right.
Okay.
Because I think that'll help in all those other areas as
It
well, like
will.
getting
It
at those
will.
resources that'll help in those other areas.
And this is the reparations is what you're saying coming from the cannabis industry.
That's right.
But-
Hmm.
And so that money will go into a fund to
Hmm.
repair neighborhoods or community, in other
That's
words.
right. Exactly.
Okay. And so we're onto the bill is on Monday. Is that what you're saying?
The final passage on Monday.
Final passage on Monday. And then there has to be a commission. Why is there so many layers in the political process? Why do we now get a bill through? Now we commission. Now we find commissioner. Now somebody has to appoint them. And then they have to,
Hmm.
you don't know who's being appointed unless you're cultivating all of them. So
Right.
why
And
is
that's
there
the work
so
we got
many
to do.
layers to get here?
Well, so kind of like I was saying in the beginning, in terms of thinking about it from a perspective of power, like
Mm-hmm.
operating these machines,
Mm-hmm.
we have to from nuts to bolts,
Yep.
every aspect of it, because otherwise someone else is going to do it. Right. So we don't want other people influencing the commission process. We got to do it. Right. And our networks are going to do it. And I think that's the attitude we got to have, in terms of moving any kind of policy. You want it soup to nuts. You want every aspect of it planned out, tight, and it takes time. It takes time and work, but it's the time and work that's necessary to truly wield power in these different areas.
Okay. Okay. And that makes sense. And that makes sense because what I've heard also is folks saying, like, when they built the casinos, it said
Mm-hmm.
that percentage of monies go here, percentage of monies go here. And I think a lot of it was to build new schools, and it was more educational based, I think, when the
Mm-hmm.
casinos came in. And folks are saying nothing happened. But I think the process is so long, you know.
Well, we didn't control the process. The people,
Oh.
the education reform movement, especially at that time, was
Mm-hmm.
white led.
Yep.
So we didn't control that process, right? And so I think it goes back to the point I'm making, which is when we talk about wielding power, we need to control every aspect of how that process goes,
Okay.
as opposed to allowing other folks to do it and then, oh, they did it wrong, and they did do it wrong, right? So then we got to do it.
So in other words, you're saying for us to get a hold of what's going on with Black people in Baltimore. And I listened to your toolkit. You said that if people who specialize in certain things should do what they specialize in.
Hmm.
So would you? This is very hypothetical. If
Hmm.
there's a cadre of organizations and they all have specialties. One might be
Hmm.
education. You guys are a think tank. This one does something with youth and families. If should there be a consortium of that to get to this culture and this structure that you're kind of talking, because of five people can't solve it. OBS won't be able to
Hmm.
solve all of
That's
it.
right.
It just won't happen. And our problems are bigger than LBS and 50 other organizations.
Hmm.
So how do we get to like the first five? You know what I'm saying? Does it have to be that specialized thing where a bunch of people come in, or a bunch of, not bunch, but organizations come together and unite towards this one goal?
I think people are doing it. I mean,
Mm,
there are people doing it. I think it's one of
excellent.
those things where we got to build on what folks are doing. Like we have networks of folks that we work with in a
Sure.
variety of different areas,
Sure.
and we support them and support each other. Like,
Hmm.
we're big supporters of the We Are Us movement, the
Okay.
anti-violence movement, right?
Hmm.
We work hard in our lane to try to get them access to public resources because they need resources to be able to scale up. And
Got
so, and that's something we do because that's a part of our lane. Like that's a part of our responsibility. You know what I mean? And
it. Okay.
so that I would argue that's happening, right? It's just a matter of it's building on the fact that that's what folks are doing. And I think there are people who recognize, oh, they do that. I'm gonna support them in my lane, support them in helping them do what they're doing over there.
Got it. Okay, so that's amazing. So let me ask a question. So if someone has like a nonprofit, right, per se, that needs policy help with policy to scale, is that they can come to like a Leaves of the Beautiful Struggle for that type of tutelage or that help?
Absolutely. So we work. There's a sister named Brittany Young, B360. She,
Absolutely, Brittany.
yeah, yeah. Because there was a bill that was put in that would have criminalized dirt bikes even further. And so she called us.
Really?
She told us about it. We said, we got you. We'll support you. She came down to testify. I was there. I provided any help that I could in terms
Hmm.
of, getting a sense of whether the bill was going to move or anything like that. And she knew she could pick up the phone and call and say, this is happening. Help us out. You know.
Okay, okay, and because when we talk about a think tank, most of us don't even know how you guys function. How you
Hmm.
kind of work. So I want to see, like, give a scenario of how
Hmm.
someone can actually access your work. But
Hmm.
I particularly know that we need to donate to your work. So tell folks how to do that.
So as I mentioned, LBS, we developed a revenue model that allows us to be sustainable.
Sure.
And there are three major aspects of our revenue model. The smallest part are grants. So there's some people that say they support our work. They're able to give us some resources, no strings attached. That's the
Hmm.
smallest. The second is fee for service, right? So we have expertise, right? And so we provide those expertise, education, community
Hmm.
organizing, advocacy, research.
Hmm.
But the piece that is the biggest, most important piece is sustainers. So people that give us money monthly.
It's what
We call them
sustainers.
sustainers. So if
Okay.
you go to lbsbaltimore.com, look up donate, go to sustainers. We're, I think, over 500 people that give us money once a month.
Mm,
And, and the more we grow that, the more we can do. Right. I mean, it's really what allows us to be able to do the work at the level we're doing it.
mhm.
And so, people listening and watching, like what you heard, it's extremely important to, become a sustainer. Go to lbsbaltimore.com. And if you can't become a sustainer, at least join our email list, because during session, there are times when we'll have action alerts to ask people to contact their legislator. And for a lot of people, that seems small. But I've literally been in Annapolis where we put out an action alert. An elected official says, all right, they saw all the emails. They're like, all right, Dayvon, what y'all want? Right.
Mhm.
And it creates the leverage to be able to move the policies that we need. So even though it seems small, even if you can't become a sustainer, become a part of our mailing list, contact your legislator. We put out action alerts, makes a big difference.
Okay, excellent, excellent, excellent. You guys do great work. I want to ask this question, just as being facetious. How do people take you guys when you Black men walk into Annapolis? How does that go down?
Oh man, they shook. You think I'm walking with a machete in my hand.
They shook, bruh.
You think I have a machete, you know?
Real like that?
Yeah, but it's all right. They can't do
Yeah.
nothing about it.
Yeah, I know it's a lot to see intelligence and articulation and and researched and
Hmm.
the ability to debate. Don't even try it.
Hmm.
So I know it's a lot for them when you guys come through.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
drop it
They'll
like
be
it's
all right
hot,
though.
huh?
Yeah, they'll be all right.
They'll be all right. Okay.
Hmm.
So what's the word when you guys come in that it's gonna they're not gonna play. They're not gonna play
Yeah,
with us. So they
they
know
know
you
what time
guys
it
do know.
is. Yeah, we
So
have
it's
a
a
track record at this
reputation in
point.
Annapolis right now, right?
Absolutely,
Wow.
absolutely.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. But I'm sure you have. Do you have when it comes to like legislators? Do you have key legislators that help you more?
Absolutely. I mean, the chief among them, Senator Joe P. Carter. She's the most revolutionary elected official in
That's
the
a
state of
bad
Maryland.
lady, man. She's a bad
Yeah,
lady. Okay.
yeah. I mean, that's how we got the reparations fund. That's how the odor searches bill, the our work around police accountability. Like she, and then the other folks that are solid. Stephanie Smith in the 45th district,
Okay.
chair of the Baltimore City delegate. There's some folks who are solid.
Solid. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Senator Carter's at another level.
Well, I wanted you to say that because we need to hear what elected officials are actually thinking about the people in
Hmm.
Baltimore. Jill Carter
Hmm.
is the GOAT, bro.
Yep.
She's the GOAT. That's beautiful to hear. So
Yep.
I love to hear that. This is the last thing. Voting. How do we get Black people out of their houses to vote? In Baltimore City. I just read something my mentor wrote. 75% of the people did not show for Texas elections. Okay.
Between the ages of 18 and 50.
18 and
Oh,
50. How does that?
hmm.
I mean, that just, how the problems that Texas has had with guns.
Hmm.
And even when, that frost they had with the infrastructure, did people forget
Hmm.
that people died, freeze in their own homes? You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm like, how, if that can happen to you and you can forget, how do we get
Hmm.
people out?
I mean, here's the thing. Most people have never really seen government deliver for them.
Whoa.
So I don't think it's irrational for people to say that I'm not participating because this hasn't helped me.
That's real
The
talk.
best we can do is we need the people who are serious about political mobilization need to be able to go to folks in the community and say, look, not only I'm not going to ask you to vote, but I'm going to go and try to get this done for the community. And if I go get this done, can you vote? And I'm gonna explain to you how you voting in this local election will help me be able to go get this block grant, then that I can fix this playground in your backyard.
Mm,
We need to start talking to people like that, as opposed
show
to try to
them.
like browbeat people into making them feel bad about it, because it's going to turn people off even more.
Yep.
I think what we need to do is say, look, I'm gonna go try to get this done. If you vote, this can help me do this. Can you do it? That's the way we need to be talking about it.
I like that. Like tell me what you need
Hmm.
or what's best applicable in your neighborhood. I'm going to work towards that. And you're going to
Hmm.
see me working. And then if you vote, continually vote for me or vote for the cult of people we're cultivating, then we all win.
That's right. That's right. That's to me. That's the way it's got to happen.
Absolutely. Because I hear so many people say, they ain't gonna do nothing for us, you know.
Mm-hmm. And they're usually right.
Yeah, you're right. People do not see government work. That's real talk right there. I
Mm-hmm.
love that. I love that. So listen, I want you to give your jewel. We need Dayvon's jewel. Drop the jewel, inspire us, and then we out of here.
I think it's important for Black people. We got to think from a perspective of sovereignty, self-determination. There's no freedom where if we try to assimilate into this decadent society, we need to build for self, build our own institutions. And that's the only pathway to freedom if we're serious about freedom. And so I hope your listeners just really take that to heart, you know, that we need to control the institutions that govern our lives. And we need to work towards that if we're serious about freedom.
I love that. Sovereignty is everything.
Yes, ma'am.
Got to be able to depend on yourself. Love
That's right.
that. And would you say what kind of society? Decadent?
Decadent, you know, white supremacist society. We can't depend on the society to take care of us, nor should we want to be taken care of. We need to operate in this society from a position of strength and power. We need to make the society deliver the things it does instead of asking it nicely to do so.
I love Dayvon. I've enjoyed you. Only a Black man in a green hat could drop decadent society on me at the end.
Yes, man.
I love you for that. Listen, I love your work. I want you guys to come back. LBS,
Absolutely.
I love Adam. I love Dayvon and Lawrence. You guys are the truth. I got to find your picture and post it now, my boys.
Yes, ma'am.
So I really appreciate your work and thank you for. I'm saying thank you for the community. We need somebody fighting in for policy for us. We don't know how important it is. Everything that we do in life is rule based, and those rules are set up somewhere. And usually it's down at the legislature. It's
That's
down
right.
in Annapolis or wherever you live. Someone's setting up your life for you. So you should be a part of that.
That's
and
right.
so I appreciate this conversation because we really wanted to get to the grassroots of what policy and politics and the application of before we kind of go into, multi-layered. A lot of people just need to hear what it is. And so I appreciate the breakdown. I really did. What
Yes,
happened to
ma'am.
your life, brother? Sun went down and
I know, right? And I'm trying to,
where
hang
you
on. I'm in the dining room.
Where you at?
Yeah.
So listen, Dayvon, you got to come back. Thanks for your time tonight, and we appreciate it. You were excellent. LBS, www.lbs.com.
That's right. LBSBaltimore.com.
Okay, www.lbsbaltimore.com. I put it wrong then. And you hit the sustainer tab, right?
Sustainer tab. Yep.
Give these Black men some money. Give LBS some money.
That's right.
So let me put it right in the chat. I corrected it. So thank you, Dayvon. We out of here. Black Boxers, good night. Let's get these deuces.
Right.
We out.
Peace.
We box out now. Don't go nowhere, Dayvon. Stay right there.